Hi, everybody. Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sue. Today, I am here with Therese Rosenblatt, who is a PhD psychologist and author of How Are You? Connection in a Virtual Age, a therapist, a pandemic, and stories about coping with life. Wait, tell me, did that just come out?
The Amazon link is live for ordering it, and it will physically come out July 20th. But
Oh,
it is
great.
available for order, and it will also be on audio and ebooks.
Okay, so maybe later you'll go back in and put the link in the
Oh,
in the.
sure.
Okay, great. Okay, so Dr. Therese Rosenblatt is a psychologist and psychoanalyst in private practice in New York with more than 26 years of experience. She treats adults, adolescents, couples, and families. So we're really happy to have you here today. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Are we frozen? I hope not. Okay, looks good. So it's almost like we can't talk about this enough, but the transition from the past year and a half to now, I think no matter how you went through it or how much you can cope with change, it's a big transition right now. So what is the biggest change in terms of parents and teenagers and how they're relating to each other?
Well, it starts with spending more time with each other than they ever thought that they would. And it's happening at a time when developmentally teenagers are meant to be shifting their focus from their home being the center more and more to the outside world and to peers. And you may all know this term, but we call this separating and individuating, where they're learning how to be a distinct person, distinct from their parents and their family, and sort of carving out their own identity. And I could say more about that. I mean, do you want me to, how it's sort of affecting things?
Yeah, we want to know, like, what could feel like it was a gift and delight could end up being a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah. So, number one, every single relationship, and parents and children are no different, is organized around a certain amount of closeness and distance. So, like with a baby, we're holding them all the time. That's very close. And that shifts throughout time. So, the balance of that relationship with kids who were, getting used to having outlets of leaving the house for their, now they don't have that, and that balance is thrown off. And now parents and kids are also having to get to know each other newly the way they didn't before. So, in a lot of families, it is a gift. And there's an old, very classic piece of research that shows that as much as teens value their peers, it seems more than anything, that they still love and value their families a great deal. That said, it is a challenge to figure out not just how they can see their friends, that's important, but how they can find the space around them to become them. And they need privacy. They need a certain amount of privacy, and they even need a certain amount of friction that we all burns us out, makes us tear our hair out. They actually use that as a way to sort of become separate, become themselves. So it makes that part more challenging.
It's interesting because we work so hard to reduce the friction. I mean, that's what we all do, right? Like, we want to figure out, if I say the right thing, can I temper the reaction? Is that like not a great thing because it's important for our kids to feel that friction in order to become an adult?
You know what? It's not black and white, and therein lies the challenge of parenting. Huge gray areas where I'm going to tell you there isn't one right answer. I'll want that. Some friction is unnecessary. And since you all, I assume this whole audience, parents of teens, have some relationship that way, we all know that provoke it, even when there seems to be no reason. Everything's going fine. Maybe you've said yes to a bunch of things ask for, and they'll still find a way to provoke action. So that they is absolutely necessary. If you get to the where it is too much. If you find that you can't recover from it, if you find, you should be able to have the then recover, even if it takes a week after a fight. If it feels like it's really getting down and they're really retreating too much, um, you know, but some ongoing friction, normal. And not normal, yes, necessary.
Yeah, I mean, as having raised 5 kids, I can tell you that I reveled in the kids that went through adolescence with ease, and I can look back and say that adulthood was a little more challenging in our relationship than the ones who beat me up in high school. And of course, I was so grateful for not experiencing what I saw other people going through, but in fact, it came out later.
So a quick little anecdote on that. When I was a young mother with 3 very young children, I had my second child, and I was going to this developmental parent support group, and I mentioned to the leader, I said, "He's so easy. I never need a break from him." And this was after a first child who was quite demanding and reactive and more difficult. She said, "He will become difficult." Wiser words were never said.
Right. So maybe in a tempered way, like not out of control and our families are destroyed by it, but maybe in a tempered way, that adolescent angst and pushing back is better when it happens at the time it's supposed to happen.
Actually, yes. And look, I hate to put out any, sort of always and nevers, because why I love my job is human development and personality is endlessly different. But yes, as a rule of thumb, the adolescent that I would worry about is the one that doesn't act out at all. Now, some do it more mildly. Some do it by constant arguing, even though, and often that's girls, but not always. My youngest son was like that. And they're not doing anything that you're worrying about on the outside, like drugs or whatever, but they're arguing all the time. So they all have different ways of doing it, but they need some of that.
Yeah, it's probably like the range of how much your breathing bothers them.
So I can't believe that you just raised this. In my book, How Are You? Connection in a Virtual Age, I write about how this process of separation has been, I use the word complicated. They're still doing it, and we can talk about that, but has been complicated by the sheltering in place. And I had 3 adolescent patients, didn't know each other, they had no relationship to each other, who all said to me at one point that their parents chewing at the dinner table bothered them. And that is what my youngest brother said to me. He's 11 years younger, and I was long gone from the house. He was alone with my parents, and he complained that their chewing bothered him. And soon after, he went to boarding school. This blew me away. But to your point about the breathing and how you can do everything perfectly as a parent, your kids will and should find a way to be irritated by your mere presence.
Yeah, I don't know how uplifting that feels right now, but okay. At least we know it's normal, right? It's good to know it's normal.
Right. Can I tell you why it's uplifting? Because it's normal, because I actually love adolescence. There's a sweetness to it, to me, that, it's like the spring buds coming out in the flowers where they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they don't feel easy about it. It feels angsty to them. And have compassion for it, and remember that half a day later, they may be snuggling with you. They love you. They're just trying to blossom. I find that uplifting and very sweet.
I find it really uplifting in other people's kids. Okay, so
take deep breaths.
Yeah. So this whole time together has been such an aberration, with nothing we've ever experienced before. And some of it, if we lived through it well, it might have taken away some of that time that our kids are pushing away from us. So what happens now as the world opens up?
So I'm not sure the connection between the two things that you feel
Like,
like.
do they have a harder time? Have they missed a chunk? Like, are they kind of set back in their leaving because of this chunk of time?
I think it really does depend on the kid. I think if either for reasons coming from the kid or if the parents have held on a bit too tightly, that it definitely, stirs up some anxiety about going back into the world. What I have found though is that many families have managed it so that, as a parent, when you work with your kid on, okay, you know, you want more control over yourself, you're stuck in your room, you're stuck with us. If you can give your kid little areas of control, if you helped your kid figure out ways that they could get together with their friends with masks on outside, whatever, and you worked with them. I actually, what I have found in a number of my patients is that they wound up doing a lot of internal work that where they were really working things out that aided to their development, where they were looking inward. And I don't think that it has to hold them back in terms of going out into the world at all. And I've seen that a lot of kids really jump back in pretty seamlessly. There are kids who are going to be more prone to anxiety, more prone to shyness. And in those cases, avoidance, staying away, might make it a little bit more difficult to jump back in.
Um, so even in bad, we can use it for good. Like, it's nice to hear that our kids might have used this time to really grow differently than they might have otherwise grown. And we all had the time to kind of like do that differently. So I guess,
Very much so. Development is very insistent. It will push forward regardless of the circumstances. So, as a parent, you want to reflect on that, which is, as you're pointing out, Susan, sometimes almost impossible in the moment. But when you're not in the moment, take a step back, reflect on what's going on with your kid, reflect on this normal part of development, and get out of their way sometimes. And in that case, development will push forward and they will be okay. And you'll see, I'm fascinated to see in 5, 10 years what kind of people these pandemic kids become
yeah.
will have affected them just the way the depression did, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I have this thing about my kids when they're home. I have this like nervousness around where they are and when they're coming home, and when they're gone, out of sight, out of mind. So I didn't have any. Well, I had kids home the whole time, in and out. But this hypervigilance of having them home for a year and a half, how how do you move away from that? Like, it's become a muscle that we exercised really well. And I wouldn't say that it's helicopter parenting. I think it's like they're in your space and you're like, did you get your homework done? Why are you gaming still? Like, all of these things. And as they have the freedom to move away and out into the world again, do you think parents have to retrain themselves a little bit?
I do think so, but I think that it can be done, um, maybe with a little bit of anxiety, but I think that it can be done quite effectively. And I've been doing a lot of thinking. It's also, I've written a little bit about it in my book, and also speaking on kind of re-entry anxiety, which in a way is what you're talking about. And I think for that and this hypervigilance, the first, sort of square one is ground yourself in the science and do it in whatever way you can, whether you read or you watch the news. I have a lovely GP who every now and then, when my anxiety level is really mounting about, can I do this? Should I do that? I make a phone appointment with him, a consultation. It's well worth it to me. And I have my list of questions. Can I do this? Shouldn't I do that? He tells me, boom, boom, boom. And once you have the science and the facts from a trusted medical source, doesn't have to be personal, um, then you have to tell yourself for your first steps, okay, doc so and so or the CDC says it's safe to, be inside with 10 people who've all been fully vaccinated without masks. The first time, the second time, you'll be a little anxious. Then as you see that things are going well, you venture out, you take the next step and the next step. Oh, be compassionate to yourself. Know your own level of risk and be respectful of that. But if you need to push yourself a little bit to let your kid go that next step, do that. Then sit back, see that it went okay, and go on from there.
We're hearing the same thing about teenagers, though, that they are having the same, not all, there's no all, but that some of them are having that same anxiety around reentry, and that it's been hard for some of them. So that takes me to the next question, which is, when you reenter for these teenagers, their social world might have changed without them knowing it. So some kids got together at a time when maybe you weren't allowed to or weren't comfortable to do it. And now that you could be places with friends, you might find out you missed that maybe the circle has closed, or you missed things and you have FOMO. How do we help our kids through that?
You're absolutely right. And that can happen at any age. And we know in the teenage world, it can happen, under normal circumstances in rapid succession. You're in one day, you're out, who knows? And it's terribly painful for these kids. And I'm actually working with a young woman right now who's going through exactly that in very dramatic fashion. I think it has to start with letting your and also let me back up and just say that kids are different this way. Some are very confident, they have an easy way with people, they're extroverted, they're not so sensitive, and they don't take things, things roll off their back. Others are more sensitive, are shyer, more anxious, maybe their reading of social cues isn't as good. So the first thing is empathize, don't push, and don't deny their anxiety. Start by saying, wow, that is very difficult. Maybe even throw in, I remember when that happened to me once at your age, and this is how I dealt with it, or just that it was very difficult. So don't deny. If you're arguing with them, they're only going to feel more alone and more anxious. But then after that, nudge them and encourage them to just take the first tiny step with something social that they feel secure about. Or let's say they're actually saying, I have no friends, whatever. Ask them to identify one kid who they like, who's been nice to them, and reach out to that kid. You don't need 50 friends, even 10 friends. You need one kid who's a peer to talk to. Start with that and take it from there.
That's gentle. I love that. Okay, so
with also a little gentle nudge, gentle from the nest.
Yeah, that's the rough part, that gentle part. Okay, so can you leave us with something positive?
I think that actually, this relates to something that you asked me before. The business of sort of what they've lost out on, or had they lost out on staying at home and missing out on some experiences. So there are two parts to my answer. One is that one of the things that happens with teenagers is that in their social circles, school, mostly, they get typecast. They get seen as a certain type of kid. And it's very hard to break out of that, both because the kids see them one way and because they feel stuck in that self-image. So know that for some kids, this might have been an opportunity to reinvent themselves and to shift to I remember when I was 14 and I was very shy, but I also loved being social. And I got a great job over the summer. I was a Senate page at the Senate. In those days, that was a good job. Um, and I knew I was going to meet a bunch of kids, really interesting kids. I knew that I could have a different experience than I had in my high school. And I was terrified of my own shyness, that I wouldn't be able to make the most out of it. And I really worked on myself and I told myself, go in there. And even if you feel shy, fake it. Just extend yourself. Be nice. Be available. Be approachable. People like it when you seem open and you make them feel at ease. If you don't know how to start a conversation, listen, ask questions. People love to talk and they love somebody who listens. So I went out there and I faked it at first and then I made it. I faked it till I made it. So this is a period where they can reinvent. And if they need a little help from you as the parent, then maybe you suggest a new setting for them where they'll meet other kids. Maybe there's an art class they wanted to try, or acting lessons, or a new sport where they'll just be exposed to more kids. And finally, how can I say something positive? I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier. I love teenagers. Please understand that what they're going through, their brains, their neurons are exploding. They're suddenly learning things. They can suddenly see things and think about things in a way that they never could before. And they're testing out all of this. And it's like a rusty old spigot that you're turning on for the first time and the water is sort of sputtering out. It's coming out unevenly. The hormones, the changes in the body, their ability to think, to anticipate consequences, which they can't really do, and that's part of your role to help them with that. And they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and it's wonderful. So just take a deep breath and work with it.
Okay, I want to tell you, I'm going to share this comment from Deborah Fish, who, by the way, a bazillion trillion years ago, I was her counselor.
Oh, wow. What goes around comes around.
So she says, camp was so perfect for becoming who I wanted to be and be with. And she also adds, and for learning and trying new friendships. That's so true.
Exactly.
Yeah, so true. I want to end with this one statement you made that I really, really love. Development is very insistent. I love that because it's like many parents walk around worried, will their kid ever? And for me, with my firstborn, it was her pacifier. Everybody would, comment how old she was with a pacifier. And those wise older mothers would say, I've never seen someone walk down the aisle with a pacifier. So I just love this. Like no matter what we do and worry about, they're gonna grow up, right? Like they're.
Do I have time for a very brief anecdote on that?
Do, of course you do.
So one of my kids, I have 3 boys, now they're all very grown, was 11 and was so oppositional and defiant and just just making our lives hell. And worst of all, making us feel like rotten, horrible parents. My husband comes in, I'm in the bathroom washing up one night. He comes in with the Ames books, your child at 10, your child at 11, reads this long passage about the 11-year-old. Apparently, all 11-year-olds are just horrific. Anyway, he was tough. This kid was tough. He is so civilized now. He's so hardworking. He eschewed all his academic work at the time. He's hardworking. He's a lovely mate to his lovely fiance. He's considerate. He loves his nieces and nephews. I mean, he sends me pictures as if they're his grandchildren. He's just a wonderful citizen and human being. And and he's 20. So I'm still sort of like, oh my God. So, as part of that, as parents, hang in there, do what you think is right. love them, try to understand them, cut them some slack, but set the limits where you need to. You know, my kid's high school principal said, it's the job of a teenager to push the limits. It's our job to set the limits.
Mm.
Normal stuff.
Yeah, all such wise things. Thank you so much, Therese Rosenblatt. And Ben is saying, good day, ladies, and Deborah Fish and new things. I'm not 100% sure what he means. Sorry, Ben. Anyway, everyone, thank you for being here. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for having